Okay, today my guest is Professor William Newburry. I will keep my introduction short to maximize our time with him. In the next 30 minutes or so, we'll talk about Bill as a person. Professor Newburry is a thought leader and an esteemed scholar, and finally is a mentor to many PhD students and junior faculty. For the sake of time, I will skip many of his accomplishments and give you a very quick snapshot. Professor Newburry is an AIB fellow. He served as the chair of the AIB Latin America and is the current past chair. He has been actively involved in many AIB roles in addition to his AOM activities. He is the AOM's International Management Division Executive Committee member. He is the series editor for Research in Global Strategic Management. He also served as chair of the Global Strategy Interest Group at SMS. He has published more than 45 articles, 3 books, and 20 chapters. He received a silver medal from JIBS, and he sits on the Senior Advisory Board of Review of International Business and Strategy, the board of JIBS, Journal of World Business, Journal of Management Studies, Global Strategy Journal, Thunderbird IB Review, and Cross-Cultural and Strategic Management. Thank you, Bill, for joining us.
Oh, well, thank you, Ilgaz, for all your efforts organizing this great series. And I'm very, very honored to be included amongst, the fantastic scholars that you've already interviewed in this series. It's really a great service that you've been doing.
Thank you. First question, what did you want to become when you were a child?
Yeah, this is a good question. I mean, I think probably an accountant or a statistician. When I was young, I have 3 younger brothers, and I was always a scorekeeper at their baseball games in Little League. Or when we played cards with my family, I was always a scorekeeper. And I was really, always, interested in statistics and, keeping track of records. And so probably the earliest thing was probably a statistician.
Bill, where did you grow up?
I grew up in a little town called Warrenton, Missouri. And actually, it was a 3,000 person town about an hour from St. Louis. And we actually lived outside the town. So I lived on the outskirts of a 3,000 person town on a gravel road next to a farm, and very rural environment.
So let me ask you about the earliest moment of awareness between domestic and international. Where did international come from?
Yeah, this is a good question. Even though I grew up in a very rural environment, my grandmother was a travel agent, and she used to lead tour groups around the world. She'd go to places, all over the world, and she would come back with stories, and she'd bring me, a little gift, like a little piece of olive wood from Greece or something like that. And I think, that was my earliest interest, was, when my grandmother would come back and from all these different trips, and it was very different from growing up in the gravel road in Missouri, and just was very exciting to me.
Of course. What was your first or earliest international trip? Where did you go?
My first international trip was when I was in high school. My dad was transferred to work in Japan for 2 years. And so we lived in the city of Nagoya, Japan for 2 years. And I went to an international high school. And this really, expanded, the knowledge from my grandmother, because now, I was in a school, and all the students were half Japanese and then half spread out from all over the world. So I had friends from Norway, from, India, from, different parts of the United States, from, other countries in Europe. And so this was, really eye-opening experience for me. Besides the fact that I moved from a 3,000 person town to a 3 million person city where I could get around by subway and things like that. It was very transformational.
Very interesting. How did you choose academia?
I think it was a gradual thing. I was always interested in learning, so I was always studying very hard. My parents, they were very. Neither of them, no one in my family had a college degree. I was the first one. But my parents were very, very interested and focused on education as a way for advancement. They were both very smart, and they didn't have opportunities when they were growing up to go to college, but they wanted, to make sure their kids had the opportunity. And so they were very, very much, you need to study hard, you need to work hard. And so they pushed me towards college. And interestingly, after I got my degree, both my parents got degrees. And my dad actually got a master's after my master's, partially because, he started, at the ground level in his job, and then he gradually got promoted, and everybody who worked for him had degrees. And so he felt he needed a degree too. And so they pushed me towards, getting a college degree. And then I think I had, really good advisors along the way at my undergraduate school, Truman State University in Northeast Missouri. My advisor, looked at and said, you're very bright. You should consider going on to advanced studies and things like that. And then when I did my master's degree, I was working in St. Louis at McDonnell Douglas. And then I did my master's degree at night at Washington University. And I had a professor there who encouraged me to submit a paper I had written for his class to a journal called the Journal of Third World Studies. The paper was on Singapore and Taiwan and the semiconductor industry. And so this gave me a feel for publishing and writing, a little bit, initial feel for writing an academic article and what that kind of career was like. And I think from there, I applied to NYU. I was very lucky to be accepted and very fortunate. And I think things continued from there.
I mean, how did you choose international business as a field? You have accounting and statistics coming from your early childhood days, and then there's IB.
Yeah, I think it's, the IB part was probably the dominant thing. I think, when I went to my undergraduate degree, I had already switched from accounting to more finance, because to me, accounting was more about calculating numbers and finance was more projecting. And I was more interested in, doing projections and coming up with strategies, how to do things. And then, really, I was, when I got to my PhD, I was interested in strategies for doing business in an international environment. And so it's kind of combining, a little bit of that statistics with, the international passion that I've had for such a long time. And I think that's the combination came from.
Perfect. Something that is not on your CV that people might find interesting about you?
That's a good question. I think, besides, both my parents were Marines, and I was born on the Marine Corps birthday in a naval hospital, and so this is, I think this is influential in my upbringing, not because I was a Marine, but because, my parents, they raised their kids sort of like, a disciplined environment, like a Marine would be, very, very, very supportive, very, very pushing us to do our best. And, this gave me some very good, strong core values that I think, carried forward with me the rest of my life.
Sure. If you stop doing what you're doing today, not that you're retiring or in time going to retire, what's the second best alternative career plan for you?
This is a good question. Early on, I considered things like a travel agent, or working for, the international strategy department of a multinational company as well. So I think the travel agent might be, the really fun thing for me to do, but I did work for 6 years at McDonnell Douglas. And one thing, I learned from there is that, the longer I worked in the corporate environment, and particularly in that environment, which was very much driven by government regulations, the more I felt constrained mentally, the more I thought I was being, taught to think a certain way and act a certain way and conform to kind of, a logic that was all built on, regulations and this is the way you do things. And I think this is probably the final thing that pushed me into academia, is I wanted a career where I could be creative and think of different things and explore different topics and not be kind of, in a very, set kind of mindset.
Bill, you're very well traveled. You've seen many countries, you lived in many countries. If you retired outside the US, where would you live if you could pick a location?
Outside the US. I lived for 1 year. I had a Rotary scholarship, and I lived in the island of Tasmania, Australia. And I really enjoyed living in Australia, so I think that's one possibility. I think the lifestyle was good, the weather's good. I mean, it's hard to pick other places. I mean, I've enjoyed everywhere I've been. There's no place I wouldn't go back. But in terms of a place that I'd like to live, maybe Australia would be one of the top choices.
Perfect. Regrets? Have you got any regrets?
I have regrets, but I also kind of look at it as there are things that I might have done differently, but the way that I did them ended up leading, often or almost always led to a path that in the long term was a good one for me. And so I think as long as you learn what you've learned from what you've done on your experiences, and I don't have any major regret that I would just say go back and change this in my life and take a different path. I think particularly the decision to quit my job and get the PhD, even though it meant moving into a very small shared apartment in New York City, and and things like that, for 4 years or 5 years while I was studying. I've never looked back at that at any regret at all. I think it was the right decision for me. It was helped me move forward, and it's been a great. I mean, I've had a very good life. I'm very fortunate.
And you're very successful. I mean, in the end, it worked out perfectly.
Yeah.
But, what are you most passionate about?
Travel. I love going to new places. I love meeting new people, learning new things. So probably travel and learning about new people and new cultures, and the history of those cultures and things such as that.
If you could, if AIB asks you, Bill, why don't you tell us where the next conference should be in person? If you could pick a country, where would you pick?
Well, I know the answer to that. So the 2022 conference will be in Miami, finally. July 5th through 9th, if anybody wants the dates. So I think after that, I like to go to new places, so it's really hard. Somewhere in Europe, Eastern Europe, possibly would be great. Somewhere in Latin America would be fantastic. I think someplace like Colombia would be very nice. They've already been Brazil, but Chile could be a great place for a conference. Peru might be a really nice place. A whole number of countries in Latin America would be fantastic. I missed the conference in Australia and South Korea are the only 2 conferences I've missed since I started going to AIB. So I'd be very happy if one of those was a future location too.
My first AIB was Australia, Sydney. It was the best compared to everything else that came later. Nothing compares to it. Okay, about research. Imagine you're stranded in a small village. People don't know your work, don't know what you do for a living. How do you explain your research to people who don't read your work regularly, and why is it important?
So I think my research is largely concerned with multinational companies, and when they invest in foreign countries, how do they interact with local stakeholders in the host environment? And so it concerns things like the reputation of foreign firms in local environments, organizational attractiveness to various stakeholders in the local environment, and what factors might impact whether someone wants to work for a foreign firm or a domestic firm in that environment. And so it's really about the interaction with different local stakeholder groups, often with respect to reputation or organizational attractiveness type issues. I think I would also say it's very important, because firms when they go to the places where they invest, they need support. They need people to buy their products. They want people to want to work there, to be employees. So they want to attract good employees. They want to attract investors. And so creating good relationships with local stakeholders helps firms succeed. Mm-hmm. And it also creates opportunities, hopefully, for local stakeholders as well. So local stakeholders, are evaluating, well, like, what does this foreign company benefit us too? And so it's hopefully a win-win situation where both parties win, but it has to be managed and people need to understand how it works.
Bill, about understudied, underutilized areas in IB research, what are some of the elements, forgotten variables, omitted variables in our research?
Yeah, it's forgotten variables is a little tricky because I think it depends on what type of mindset you're coming from. Often, a variable that's not in a macro level study is actually being studied by somebody who's more cross-cultural, more micro-oriented, and vice versa. So I do think that it's somewhat based on a scholar's particular interest and a subfield within the broader IB area. I think where there's a need, and it's getting better in here, but where there's a need is to study more cross-level issues and develop more cross-level studies that realize and people understand this, but to realize IB is not just about the multinational, it's also about the context where they operate, the political environment, the institutional environment, and it's also about the people within the company and the people in the local environment that buy the company's products. Which studying these different levels takes different types of skill sets, takes different research method skills, but also draws on different theories. And so I think the part that's not as well studied is the intersection between these different pieces of a very complex environment.
If a PhD student comes to you seeking advice on great, interesting, super exciting dissertation topics, what's the next 5 to 10 years of the field? What's going to be the next wave?
It's a good. I think the first thing I would say is pick something you're passionate about. I think this is you're going to be working on something for 5 to 10 years. Your dissertation takes multiple years, and then it takes you need to want to do that. And so the first thing is think about what do you want to do and what's going to be beneficial to you. And then I think flourishing areas a lot have to do with intersections between more traditional international business topics and other areas that have been less covered, such as marginalized groups across borders. And so this is something I'm interested in, is how do things like gender and race and sexual orientation and poverty dimensions, how does that impact interactions with the multinational company, and who benefits from multinationality and who doesn't. So I think some of the lines, being focused just on countries and more on the intersection between different marginalized groups and the country of the multinational type topics. I think there's a lot of room for development there.
About creativity in research, where do creative ideas come from, or how did your creative ideas come from? How did you publish these very interesting papers? What's the secret?
I don't know if there's a secret. I think you think back to the Kung Fu Panda movie where the whole thing is there's no real secret, right? I think part of it's just believing in yourself, which I think is something is sometimes can be very difficult. I think part of it is looking at what's going on in the environment where you're working, where you're residing, and looking at what companies do. Hopefully, talking to multinational managers and seeing what issues do they see. And then, it's a skill set that it takes time to develop, but thinking about, what you need to understand what's been done already. And then you need to think about, what important topics are missing, or what's been done but they haven't really touched, they missed something. And what big thing did they miss because maybe they were using just a US sample and things are very different in Latin America or in specific in Colombia, and what kind of, by taking a different lens on things, and what can we gain? What kind of insights can we gain?
About the evolution of IB from when you were starting early till today, what kind of a progress do we have? Where are we going? I know where we're coming from. What can we say about the evolution of IB research?
Yeah, I think, it's going through a period now where I think it's becoming, I think there's a lot more research being done on the interconnections of the multinational with these other levels of analysis that I mentioned. So when I mentioned, these are future areas, it doesn't mean no one's doing stuff there now. A lot of people, it's starting to be, a hot area where, people are realizing, that we really need to understand the context, and we really need to understand the political environment. Journals like the Journal of International Business Policy, that AIB created, just a few years ago, are recognizing this. And so I think a good thing about the IB field is it is becoming broader now and emphasizing, the connections with different other fields. I think there was a while where it was more contracting and more focused really on kind of international strategy type issues, which are very interesting to me in my core. But I think to the detriment of excluding other type functions. And I think now, and I think there's a little bit, over time there's been an emphasis on big data sets, and I think that's still going to be there. But I think people are realizing and start recognizing more the importance of, combining research based on existing data sets with, research based on other methods that get more into the mindset of what managers are thinking and how are they making decisions and the like.
Bill, can we switch to advice and mentoring? And can you tell us who was your advisor? Who was your mentor?
My co-majors or my co-advisors were Bill Guth and Miles Shaver at NYU. I know Miles has done one of these talks already, and I would say he was a fantastic in giving me advice as a doctoral student at NYU. And then Bill Guth was fantastic as well. And, I was really blessed.
What's the best advice you received from your advisors?
I think, at one point, I was, a little bit, something, not so good had happened at it. And advice was, everybody has some kind of hurdle. And so some people it may be, in methods, some people it may be the theories, some people it may be something completely different. And the thing is just, you'll realize, everybody has this. It's not that, the problem with you, it's just part of the process. And the key is to get over the hurdle and to think through, how to do it and not realize that you're alone, that, there's a support system to help you to get over things.
What do you wish you would known when you were starting out that would save you so much time, efforts, pain, agony?
I think there's a tendency to think, that you're somewhat, illegitimate in the field. I think particularly starting out, I've heard the term, you feel like you're a fake, and I think everybody goes through that at some point, early in their career where, there's all these smart people out there and they've written fantastic work, and how could I ever write anything like that? And not that I ever have even now, but I think the key is to get over it and just realize you were accepted into a PhD program because you're good. It wasn't an accident that you got into the program, and that everybody takes time to develop and so and realize that you're not a fake. You're really legitimate. You're just at an earlier stage in the learning curve. And I think this is good advice for all PhD students to keep in mind.
One of my comprehensive exam questions, one of my advisors asked, write a letter to one of your idols and tell them about your research, ask for advice on how to proceed with your paper. And in the comp exam, you're given a short period of time, you're pouring your heart out, you're doing a lot of citations. Then after a while, then I started thinking, let me just write a letter to one of my idols. And yeah, they took like 2 months to write. And I'm still feeling quite bad about myself. And I'm saying, how on earth, how can this person even think whether this letter that he receives is worthy of reading? I'm not even at that level. That's what I was thinking. I know exactly what you mean about feeling that.
I felt it. I think everybody has felt it, and I think it's
What and Bill, what are some of the common mistakes or common things that the junior faculty, the young scholars do that you say, oh, you shouldn't be doing that?
Some things. I mean, one thing that, and I'm guilty of this myself. So it's don't do what I say, not what I do. Is overextending yourself. So working on too many things in too many disparate areas. I think as academics, we're interested in learning stuff, and so we want to do all kinds of different things. But there's a trade-off between scope and depth, and you need to have depth to get things published and to work through the process. And so one thing is to focus. Another thing that I see is people, junior scholars, being too critical and too much of a perfectionist, that they're not willing to release projects to journals to get reviews. But at the same time, there's a few that just release them too soon too. You need to get some informal feedback first. But I think there is I've seen people who are just so perfectionist and so scared of getting a rejection letter, which everybody's getting them. I still get them all the time. That they don't want to release anything, and I think you need to get over that hurdle and just send it out there. At some point, you need to just send it out and get the feedback from the editor and the reviewers and work from there. And I've also noticed, sometimes I'm not the best judge of my work. I've had things published that I thought were not as moving or not as advancing the literature, has things that got rejected right away. And so I think sometimes getting some friendly feedback can help as well.
Sure.
And should be a required part of the process.
Which paper or book or work is your baby, the most favorite one, the one that you love the most?
It's a tough question. I just published a book, an edited book with Sam Park and Alvaro Cuervo Pazura on emerging market multinationals and their strategic capabilities. I think this may be a recency effect, but I think this one, we coordinated a network of scholars in 12 different countries, 12 different emerging markets. And in each emerging market, the local scholars interviewed CEOs and top managers of firms in their market. And so we ended up with a set of 72 emerging market firms that, with interview data in the book across, the 12 markets. And I think just the accomplishment of coordinating the network itself and getting this book out, I think was, a pretty cool thing. I also think, it has very, in-depth, kind of, advice on, which capabilities, the top leaders of these companies saw as strategic. And so I think it's moving the field forward, and it was just kind of a pleasure of a project to get through. And so if I had to pick one right now, and again, there may be a recency effect since it was just published, but that would probably be it.
Perfect. Congratulations on the book as well.
Oh, thank you.
Bill, last question for the sake of time. What is one question that I should have asked about Eminent?
I think a question, and again, it's sort of in the last area, is how does a young scholar develop a professional network? I think more and more, but even from the beginning, international business topics require a multi-dimensional skill set. It's very, very relatively rare now that you're going to see a sole-authored paper. Almost all papers are co-authored, and a big reason for this is that IB topics, you need knowledge on different methods, often you need knowledge on different, they're combining different disciplines. So you might need somebody who's a knowledge on one topic and then somebody on another topic. And it's hard for one person to learn all that themselves. And so I think, developing a network of scholars that you can work with really is important for a research career. You can't do it all by yourself. And so I've been very fortunate to work with fantastic co-authors all throughout my career, and many, we've done multiple papers together. And I think this is something that needs to be cultivated, and it should start early on. It should start as a PhD student, both within your university by developing relationships with your other PhD students in the program. Several people I am still working with, I was working with as a doctoral student. But also you should be going to conferences and attending doctoral consortium and, meeting people, in the field, people that use papers you've read. It's nice to know that they're real people and realize, these are real people just like me, and these are people I can aspire to be like, because, and learning their stories, because this gives you help in doing that. And they can provide really good mentorship too. These people tend to be very generous with their time in this field. People treat, international business as a community of, scholars, work together for a common goal. And so I find, when I have questions, if I ask people, they're very generous with their time and providing answers. And I think, young scholars need to keep this in mind.
Thank you so much, Bill, for this great interview. I enjoyed it. I learned a lot. I'm sure the audience will agree with me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ilgaz. Again, I appreciate all your efforts organizing this. And, I'm very honored to be part of this, this group of scholars, in this series. Thank you.
Thank you.